Ah, the sweet sounds of spring. Don't you love it? The birds are singing and all those, other sounds. I love spring. Welcome to spring, Thrive Loud listeners. We made it. As you're transitioning from the brisk cold of winter into the sunshine-filled spring, make it your springtime resolution to listen to the inspirational speakers that we have here on Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond. Cleaning the house? Listen to Thrive Loud. Doing yard work? Thrive Loud. Going for a run outside? Thrive Loud, people! We put all of these shows together for you, our listeners, and you are totally missing out if you're not tuning in. So grab your phone, computer, iPod, whatever it is, subscribe to Thrive Loud on wherever you listen to podcasts, and start getting inspired. Pretty soon, you'll start thriving in your own life each and every day.
Get ready to Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond, and today on Thrive Loud, we have a very special guest. When there is a need to be comfortable, confident, and effective in every room, this individual provides the tools and techniques that create the connections and collaborations that build business relationships. This is why I'm going to love this conversation so much. Known as the Mingling Maven, she is the leading international authority and original expert on how to work a room. Her best-selling books, popular interactive presentations, and media interviews help people, companies, and organizations successfully develop, build, and manage client relationships that increase business growth. Thrive Loud listeners, we are in for a connecting, fun conversation with RoAne. Susan, how are you today?
I am great. This is going to be such fun.
I'm excited. So I love when connections get connections get connections. And I was introduced to you by one of our favorite fun guests, Michelle Lederman, who recommended that we had to connect because she and I are connectors. She just wrote a book about connecting. I wrote a book about connecting. And you are one of the original experts, as I read in the intro, about how to work a room and that importance of those interpersonal relationships. I think our listeners would love to hear something that I actually want to start this conversation off with a celebration. It is not often that you get a chance or anyone gets a chance to listen to someone who has had a successful book that has been on the bookshelves for 30 years and still rocking and rolling today. So talk about this incredible achievement that How to Work a Room has achieved and yourself. And we'll work our conversation through that. How does that sound, Susan?
Well, it's funny because when I do my speaking, some of my audiences are younger than my book.
Oh, my goodness.
I know. It's amazing. It is amazing because I believe, as I did when I started writing it 31 years ago, that the idea of walking into a room full of people that we don't know is daunting, and the statistics on shyness, etc., prove it, for really almost 90% of the population. And you know what, Lou? That hasn't changed.
Huh. And it is so true. I actually just spoke recently at a conference, and we talked about the number one request that people have and why they attend large conferences or networking groups is to network. And the number one thing that they're not good at when they're at those conferences, they said, is the ability to intermingle and network with others. So the problem still exists today, which means they just need to buy your book, and it's still available, which is great.
Well, here's the other thing, and I like to explain this to anyone who will listen. Knowing how to work a room is a different skill than networking. And how I prove that is 2 different books, How to Work a Room, and my second book, The Secrets of Savvy Networking. Nothing repeated in either book. So How to Work a Room is that first skill you need to meet the people, and I call this old-fashioned word, socialize for business. But the second skill, how do you have that follow-up known as the networking? And what should you do and shouldn't you do is really important. That's a different skill. Some people are great at networking. They follow through. They introduce you to people. But the idea of walking into a room full of people still is daunting. And we all know people that are great in a room. You can talk to them. They're fun. They have zero follow-up skills. They don't even want to know you the next day. And so they're really terrible networkers. But the combination of both of those skills is imperative, and it is personally and professionally a benefit you can't even put a number on in terms of monetary value.
Susan, for all these years, have you been naturally comfortable at mingling with others when you come into these environments?
Well, the pressure on me is huge. I once went to a friend's son's first birthday party, and someone said to me, "Oh, I'm going to watch you work a room." And I remember saying, "Really? The clown's working the room. Give me a break." But I've been comfortable around people. And I'm going to say this so that our listeners know, it really isn't about how facile you are in, meeting and exiting and making conversation. The core trait you need to be able to do this is liking people. If you like people, you're interested. If you like people, you're amiable. If you like people and feel comfortable around people, and here's the trick, they then sense it and feel comfortable around you. So I think it's a little more basic than all the hoopla that we're hearing. Do you like people? And by the way, Lou, I know people who don't like people.
I was just going to go there and say, so those that don't like people, can they benefit from how to work a room if at the core for who they are is not a people person? Can they connect that way?
If they want to, in terms of if you know that inside, and you may think it may be the reason you don't like people is that you are shy. Maybe you don't like people because inherently you might be one of those who is a real introvert. But if you want to, and you follow some of the things that, I recommend and other people recommend, but if the core is that you'd like to be more amiable, more personable, more connected, and you work to change that, I believe it will work. I honestly, Lou, I don't believe that people bought this book just to put it on their bookshelf. I think people bought it because whether they're shy or introverted or don't like people, they know that they're missing out and they want to be part of this.
I wanted to ask a really fun question here. And
I won't tell you how much I weigh.
No, I would never go in that direction. My goodness. And not anybody how much I weigh. That's classic. I'll share how much I weigh, but that's not important. The fun question I have here is I have seen people try to work a room and it not come out so effectively. It almost felt disingenuous. It felt like maybe they were maybe trying too hard. So I wanted to tap into your advice. When you see people come in and try and figure out ways for them to connect with others and for them to learn how to really grow those relationships and interact with people, but maybe are doing some things wrong, how do you work with those people to help them almost become more authentic?
Well, I think when you give people enough of the tools that work, and it really, the number one tool is preparation. And there are a couple of items of preparation where you feel more confident. And sometimes it's just saying to people, and this is one of the things people have said helpful is, instead of worrying about making yourself comfortable, here's your new Susan RoAne How to Work a Room homework. Your job in every room is to try to make other people comfortable with you. Because when you come in with the attitude, I'm going to make people comfortable with me, you aren't the bull in the china shop. You aren't tossing out business cards to people you haven't talked to. But you have to supplant that with, here's some better ways to do things. But having that goal is, let me make people comfortable with me. Then people get to see the real you. Then you're more comfortable, they're more comfortable, and then you're on your way to a connected conversation.
Oh, I like that. I want to have fun here with you because I know I can, because we've had conversations before we've interviewed, and our listeners will appreciate this. Susan, if you would, give us some no-nos and do nots as it relates to working a room. Some of the things, maybe even you've seen recently, because to your point, when you opened, it's still something that people need to work on. So what are the things that have been the, nope, those are not really highly recommended things I would suggest type things?
Well, we used to say when you're talking to someone, don't look over their shoulder to see who more important, more of an influencer, a word I don't like, but more of an influencer, better title is in the room. And people used to do that. We used to attribute that to politicians. But politicians, actually, I've even spoken to the Association of Lobbyists, they know better than that. However, now we have a problem is leave your devices in the car, at home. When you are on a device in a room, people will not come over and talk to you because they'll think you're busy and occupied. So that's number one. Number two, if you, let's say, here's my line I write in my books and I say in my talks, please do not have your phone out unless you are in need of a new heart, liver, kidney, or are the surgeon who's going to do the operation.
I like this idea because you're basically like, put it away unless it's an emergency.
Unless it's emergency. And by the way, if you explain that emergency, look, I need to let you know that my phone has to be on because my mother fell and my brother's going to call me to see if we can connect about what skilled nursing home to put her in. If you explain to people, they understand. But, I've had people do it, and we all have. They have their phone, and they're talking to you, and they're taking a quick glance to see who's texted them. There is nothing more insulting than saying, by the way, anyone who calls or texts me is more interesting than you, who I'm standing in front of insulting.
I'd even add to this. I wanted to bring this because I know you work within organizations and you have a consulting business. I've actually seen people inside of a company have issues where literally a manager was talking to somebody on his team in an office and couldn't keep his eyes off the phone from the other activities that were going on, when this was actually a personal or a situational and problem that had gone up in work, and it couldn't put the phone away. And how that disconnects you in that environment, it says so many bad things. It's just like bad manners, for lack of a better word, but it also, like you said, it feels disrespectful.
No, I love that you said lack of manners, because that's really, lack of manners is one of the premises of Secrets of Savvy Networking. I was just rereading my book. There is nothing wrong with saying you got to have manners. Really, honestly, Lou, I think 90% of good and savvy networking, my term, is that it is an expression of good manners, of how to treat people appropriately. Insulting them by looking around definitely is not. It kind of reminds me of an old line. I'm going to paraphrase Golda Meir when she was prime minister of Israel. It was like, she said to one of her generals is like, don't be humble. You're not that great. So the paraphrase I would say is, you're not that important.
Or at least not that important at that moment, maybe the right response too, right?
Exactly. So be measured. Remember, here's another thing, another no-no. Don't be fooled by titles. I've seen people at networking mixers or receptions or business conferences do a beeline for the person with the big title. You never know what that title means in that company. Right. So while you're brushing off the person who has a title you don't think is that important, have the brains to know that next year they could be the person you want to talk to.
Exactly. I was just going that way, that you could be speaking at that moment to the future CEO of the organization, and they'll always have that memory that they didn't think you were important at that time.
And I have a story about that. Back in the days when we had Pac Bell, one of the women I knew told me that she was at a professional luncheon, and her title was director. And these two people had a program they wanted Pac Bell to hire, but they kind of glossed over her because she was director. And she never forgot the insult. Well, they did make the appointment. And she said she wished she had a camera when they walked into the appointment, and she was the person in charge of who was going to be hired to do the project. See, I love it. People call it karma. I call it, oh, thank you, karma. What I'm going to say is going to sound very Pollyannish to all of our listeners, but if you really want to make an impression and make a positive impression so that you are memorable, this is all I hear, and for 30 years, I want to be memorable. Don't be memorable for the wrong reason. Okay? Be nice to everyone.
So now I want to ask the question that is the retort of this. If you are in the workplace, and we know that we can't leave our cell phones in the car, they're attached to our hips, and there's so many forms of communication as we're literally walking across different companies or offices, and it's basically taking our desk with us where we need to. When you're in a situation, when you see someone, whether professionally or socially, and they are being rude in the way we're describing it as they're using their phone, what's the best way to communicate to those people that what you're doing is disrespectful in a way that gets the message across but doesn't necessarily come off unlikable?
Geez, I don't know if you it's come off unlikable. Oh, I'll tell you a story. Maybe we can all borrow it. In fact, I called my local San Francisco Chronicle paper and got in the paper. We were saying hello, Dolly here with, I mean, it was just wonderful. Well, in the middle of one of her wonderful Dolly Levy Gallagher monologues, a cell phone went off. This was like 3 weeks ago in the front row. And she did not break from character, but she looked down and said, "Oh, is that for me?"
I like it.
And
I mean,
it's like, I think handling it with a little humor, but if you don't say something, then that it gives permission. I would like to tell you what the follow-up she then said. She then said, they have a button on there to turn it off. And it was like, you should have heard the audience applause.
Yep.
And again, it's even as simple as, do you turn your phone off when you walk into a theater, a movie house, a concert? When your grandmother has you for dinner and has the whole family over? So I think it's really dicey, because calling a boss on rudeness is, I wouldn't even know what you would say. And maybe you don't say anything. Maybe, I'm a former school teacher, Lou, and I taught 6th grade. So maybe what you do is you look at the person and you give them the 6th grade teacher's evil eye, uplifted eyebrow look.
which still scares me, because I remembered I had a 5th grade teacher who did that very well. Yes.
I still practice it. And it gives a message, but there are no words that someone could say, "Don't ever say that to me again in front of my employees," because you said nothing. So sometimes it's a look, or maybe it's even that look like you put your hands up and go, "What?" You don't even have to say the word. You know that expression. But I think saying nothing is a case-by-case study, and you want to be very careful. But the other thing you don't want to do is do any name calling, call someone rude.
It is a tough one. I will say there have been moments in my life when I've actually called someone out on it, because it was so disrespectful at the time that it happened. However, I do know that there is one thing that can happen, and that is a little bit of the flip-flop piece, which is, if you say, is time important to you? Is our time important? And recognizing that if you laser focused on that conversation or that person within that time window, you're actually going to get a lot more done. And any of the distractions, whether somebody's phone ringing on a stage, whether it's, someone glancing off at their phone or their screen and being distracted from the task at hand, you're only delaying the time more. So recognizing and maybe even communicating out, if time's important to you, can we please focus and get this done? We can always get back to our devices later. I've used that tactic a couple of times as maybe a way to come off a little bit like, please, you're being disrespectful, but let's get the job done. And then we can go back and check our messages or whatever other means we're being distracted by.
Well, that is good. But as you talked, I thought of an old expression, left to their own devices. How that really has some new implication. But I do like that. It's like focus on the time. It's like we even said this to kids. Let's get this done and then you may play. It's like finish your dinner and then you can have dessert. This is how we have to treat people. But I think the idea is you also want to be respectful, not only in the words you say, but this is, and having also written What Do I Say Next, it's also in the tone at which you use. Because you can say it's a wonderful segment that I love on Seth Meyers' show. How you say what, you can say it in 25 ways. So, but you want to make sure you're using, when you're talking to people, a tone that is amiable, connecting, positive. You don't want to use a tone that would make your words look like arrows.
Susan, you just made my production team incredibly excited, as I imagine there will be a montage of Seth Meyers' How You Say Something at the end of the show.
I just forgot her name, but she's one of Amber Ruffin. It's Amber Says What. Right. And I recommend everyone to go to YouTube so you could see how many different ways you can say a word and what its meanings are.
So I want to go into two things here, and then I'm going to come back to this topic again, because we can go on forever on this. Actually, we'll go to this first, just to put it to bed. I one time went out with a whole bunch of couples, and we decided to play cell phone roulette and said, everyone put your cell phones in the middle of the table, and the first person to grab their phone during the has to pay for the check.
I love that. That's even better than Russian roulette, though it might feel like it is.
It was more like credit card roulette, I guess, but a more effective way.
You know what?
I'll tell you what happened. This is the first time we've proposed this. We had 6 people, 5 people put their phones in, and the one woman who basically thought about there's no chance she's not going to be able to do it. She goes, I got dinner.
Oh, that is precious. Good for, but you know what? They're doing some events. I'm here in the San Francisco area, and we hear, right around Silicon Valley, we hear all the young techie millennials, oh, they don't have cards because I can zap you into my list and I can link to you, but then you don't remember who I am. But they are now doing events where it's check your cell phone at the door.
Yeah, I like it.
You can keep your coat on, but you check your cell phone at the door.
Susan, I know you have a consulting business, and there's a little bit of a story to the name of the consulting business. Can you share with the listeners how that all came to be?
Yes. Having, How to Work a Room came out #1 on Book of the Month Club, and a lot of different city lists, lots of radio and TV. So I had a lot of people who wanted to write books, and they thought they should say to me, and they all did, oh, can I buy you a cup of coffee and pick your brain? Well, it got to be so oppressive, and this is like 28, 25 years ago, that my consulting business is Pick My Brain Consulting.
I do like that. Because we are picking your brain, and that's what we're doing for someone who's had these great relationship experts over the years. And you're a great speaker. I love you've trademarked and copyrighted, or whatever the right appropriate word is, for the Mingling Maven.
Trademark.
Yep. The Mingling Maven, which is such a great name. And I want to ask this question, which I ask most of the guests on the show, Susan, and that is, on days when you are off, not having the best day, things aren't going the way you'd really like it to be, which I like to say, when you're having trouble thriving, who or what practice do you seek to get back on the thriving track?
Number one, I spend a lot of quiet time. That's number one. But number two, and this goes into everything we're talking about, when I'm having some days that look like they're not great, I have a network of real friends. It's the five that gets on the court for the actual game.
The starting five, right?
Talking NC2A here. I pick up the phone and call people who I know love and adore me, who will remember the good things to feed back to me. So I think this goes back to, yes, have a great business network and be sure you know everyone and you can leverage whatever. But you better have that, the 3 to 5 people you can call. And by the way, we rotate in. Sometimes if it's about something that has to do with a specific business, I have to rotate out someone to bring in a bencher who is actually very dear to me, but can help me through that. So that's number one. Second thing I do is I will listen to music I like or take a walk.
And
getting outside, that does something.
I'm a big fan of movement too, and you live in such a great part of the country, which is great. So there's so many things to see, walk around. I'm a big fan of the movement too. I like that, just to get yourself, like, change your position. It's almost like it changes your state of mind just by actually moving. Big fan of that.
Also, if you work in a home office, you can pop yourself a big bowl of popcorn, put lots of butter and salt on it, and eat your way into a really better mood.
At this point in the show, provide all the listeners with all the places people can find you, and we'll put it in the show notes, but it always comes better when they hear it from you.
Well, the first place you can find me is in the local bookstore, How to Work a Room. Second thing you can find me is on the web. It's SusanRoAne.com, SusanRoAne.com. And if you forget that, you can also go to howtoworkaroom.com and find me. The other way to find me, and if you really, and I say this to all the audiences, if you have a burning question, I don't want you to get an ulcer. Here's what you do. You send me an email, susan@susanroanne.com. And if you have a burning question, I'll take a couple moments to answer it. If it's a lengthy question, then you're a consulting client, and then you can hire me to pick my brain. But let's get rid of and solve anything that is a burning question. Here's another way, especially if you know of a company who needs my help. I am hireable. Now, this is what I learned from a 4th grade teacher when I first started teaching in San Francisco. Here's what you can do. Get a pencil and paper. You can call 415-461-3915. I answer my own phone. If you got a big question or something that you need to have answered, pick up the phone, which, by the way, is sometimes lost on a lot of people as they do everything online. And that's something I'd underscore. If you have a question, not just me, but with other people, pick up the phone. The connections are solidified by conversation.
Susan, I think it's one of the more interesting things that I've been chatting about and speaking about of late. A lot of the podcasting work that I do and the way that you're able to connect, because our voices are able to really carry forward so much of the likability, of the ability to connect, of to really understand what someone's about, to really listen and truly grow relationships. And you are so right about the value of having that phone conversation. You know, with all the technology access we have from texting, web chatting, emails, if you keep distancing yourself enough, I think we're in this window, by the way. I think the technology is getting to the point that what is going to happen, just like in all these new sci-fi movies, we're going to have a watch or a phone that a picture of the person we're looking to speak to actually beams up and we speak and hear with them all the time. It's going to happen. So I'm only hoping this small window of time of these other non-verbal ways of communicating will be minimized, and we do take advantages, to your point, of actually picking up the phone and calling someone. So kudos to you. Thank you for sharing that number with us.
You are welcome.
I'm sure you're going to be bombarded. At least someone's calling you within the next, launch of this episode. All right, Susan, we're going to have the most fun at the end of a podcast I've had in a long time. Can you share with the listeners your all-time favorite movie?
Oh my gosh, Guys and Dolls, Marlon Brando, Frank Sinatra, Stubby K. Sit down, you're rocking the boat. I'm from Chicago. I always thought of myself as Big Julie from the South Side. So yeah, Guys and Dolls.
We won't go to the fact about this, but there was some high school production I might have been in that people can call me on, or I might have been in it. So, well, anyway, it's a classic, and I love how you brought back some great actors, and connecting with you is awesome. And I hope our listeners get to appreciate it. You can actually feel Susan's likability, the true Mingling Maven, and you can understand that if you did see Susan in a room, not only would she work that room well, you'd want to follow her around and take notes along the way. So thanks again for coming on, Susan, for sharing, and continued success with your books, with your platform, with your speaking and everything, because you thrive loud each and every day, and we know that.
Thank you.
And to all our Thrive Loud listeners out there, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
And I said to myself, sit down, you're rocking the boat. Said to myself, sit down, you're rocking the boat. And the devil will drag you under with a soul so heavy you'd never float. Sit down, you're rocking the boat. Sit down, you're rocking, you're rocking the boat. Sit down, you're rocking, you're rocking the boat. Sit down, you're rocking.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Thrive Loud. Or find us on the web at thriveloud.com.